Firefighters New York, of course, paid a big price. Well, time now for a look through the papers. Joining us this morning, American journalist Beth Gardner. Beth, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning to you.
It's interesting to see the different approach taken in the papers, but you've gone for perhaps the most... well, it's quite stark, actually, the front of the Independent on Sunday. It's just got this very small, compressed photo of the New York skyline and then the lost decade.
Yeah. It is quite stark, although I thought actually that the story inside is a little bit more complex than that headline, The Lost Decade, would tell you. And it touches on two things that I sort of feel are important about this day, this anniversary. The first is just the pure remembrance of the day and the absolutely jaw-droppingly shocking nature of what happened that day and how hard it was for us as observers to comprehend it. There's so much that's happened in between Afghanistan, Iraq, Guantanamo, all of these things that are linked in various ways to 9/11, that it's almost hard to get back to before that and what happened on 9/11. And I think the story touches on some of that.
Is it actually a lost decade? Because some would perhaps interpret what's happened in those 10 years as meaning, you know, the war on terror was waged, and perhaps it was won in Iraq, hasn't been won in Afghanistan yet, and did it actually lead to the Arab Spring in some ways?
Well, you know, that all depends on your perspectives. The other question is, what was the cost of all those things, and what were some of the intended and unintended consequences? I heard last week the American commentator Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, very sort of prominent voice in U.S. foreign affairs debate, say that from his perspective, the last 10 years were perhaps the worst decade in American history. You know, the Iraq War, yes, Saddam Hussein is gone, but there's obviously tremendous, you know, dispute and controversy about whether that was a worthwhile endeavor at all, the billions of dollars and the many tens of thousands of lives that it cost.
Yeah, and certainly this piece in The Independent with Rupert Cornwell saying that America lost its confidence, stripped of its illusions, that there was a psychological change as a result of all this.
Yes, absolutely. And you can see that with some of the, you know, the warnings that are going on today.
Well, yeah, well, let's look at that. In fact, that's concentrated on The Observer.
Indeed.
Although, I guess, you know, New Yorkers have been used to this, what, 12 major alerts in the 10 years since 9/11?
You know, we've lost count, I think. Before 9/11, I think Americans sort of failed to grasp the fact that they could truly be under threat, and that has become very much of a commonplace in the last 10 years. We're seeing it today on the anniversary, but as you point out, we've seen it many, many times since.
And looking at what this piece is marking in terms of the names, the individuals, 10 years on, is this time now when people can stop and take a breath and actually try and realise what happened on that day, that it's been pushed to one side to a degree when they pursue this war on terror?
Yes, you know, I think that's what Americans actually want to do on this day. It's become almost a sacred day, I think, in the American calendar, the 11th of September every year. And as we were discussing earlier, there's so much that's intervened and so much water under the bridge since then. But the anniversary is, in a sense, a way to get back to that day and to the lives that were lost.
And looking at those individual stories, when we just featured the firefighters there, and indeed the Sunday Telegraph has gone with some of those stories. This is Philip Sherwell speaking to, well, Kevin Murray, Roy Chelson, and those who thought even after the collapse of the towers they were still going to die. Yeah.
Well, you know, obviously the impact on the New York Fire Department and the other first responders was one of the most heartbreaking aspects of that day. 343 firefighters died in the towers, which does not include scores of other police officers and other first responders. You know, I think it's become sort of a commonplace since 9/11 to talk about the way that the individual acts of heroism and just pure sort of human kindness, individuals, you know, not in uniform, helping others, helping work colleagues or strangers out of the towers. People
so amidst the worst, the best
assistance
came out in people. And that's what you're trying to concentrate on.
Indeed, yeah, and you certainly see that. You know, the thought, I think, to most of us, of climbing up the steps of a burning 110-story building, just
when
less than an hour from collapse.
They weren't going to come out.
I think a lot of those guys did. I read yesterday of a priest who was giving absolution to firefighters getting ready to go in. These guys were asking for confession. You know, they knew what they were getting into. and a lot of them did, you know, find it was
went
their
ahead and climbed those stairs.
the end for them. Indeed. So that's, you know, pretty hard for a lot of us to comprehend, but many hundreds of people did it that day.
Beth, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll return to the papers later, of course, see what else is in the Sundays, but certainly some food for thought there in the Sundays this morning. Thank you very much indeed for that. You're watching Sunrise this Sunday morning and on our website at Sky News.